My guest today is Lisa Herbert. She's an author, journalist, and audio producer, blogger, cemetery wanderer, having published her funeral planning guide and workbook 10 years ago. Lisa Herbert is on a mission to make conversations about death and dying less awkward. The bottom drawer book, The After Death Action Plan, colourfully and respectfully opens that conversation by encouraging readers to explore what they want their farewell to look and feel like. Lisa draws on her 20 years of experience within the broadcast media to research and communicate the facts and quirks about death, dying, and funerals in a non-confrontational way and wherever possible with humour and colour. You'll often find Lisa wandering cemeteries and telling the stories of our past in the hope of convincing each of us that our stories are important by documenting your plans and life's reflections. Loved ones can grieve and celebrate the real you and your honest story, knowing it's just what you wanted. Hi, Lisa. Thanks so much for joining us. It's so wonderful to have you here. I'm really, really excited about talking about this amazing book. I spoke about it. Like when I bought it, I read it, and I just said to everybody, you need to fill this in because there's so much I didn't know. So, how did you get into even writing this?
Exactly what you've just said. I didn't know. The year was probably 2011, and I started thinking I'm a little bit organized and I need to be more organized, and I'd like to, not burden my family should things go pear-shaped, because it can happen at any time.
That's right.
And I wanted to make informed decisions, and I couldn't find the information that I wanted to make those informed decisions. And I just started calling funeral directors and morticians and visiting cemeteries and talking to anyone in the field who would be gracious enough with their time. And so many were. And in the end, I had all this information, and I just thought, I can't be the only one who can't find this stuff. Because in those days, which was only like just over 10 years ago, there wasn't the social media platforms that we see today being utilized by funeral directors and morticians. I mean, these days you can watch a post-mortem on YouTube.
Yeah.
But 10 years ago, that wasn't the thing. So that's exactly how it happened. I mean, I've always been interested in this space, and always been a fan of Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's works, which I read as a young teenager because my mother had those books in the house. And Dr. Kubler-Ross was amazing because up until her research in the 60s and 70s, the emotional needs of the dying had never been assessed by the medical profession. And I couldn't understand this. And ever since then, I was on this path that I didn't realize I was on until the bottom drawer morphed into what it is today. Yeah. And the response has been fantastic.
Yeah. And for it to be going, like I've only recently, like a couple of months ago, found you. I think I saw you interviewed years and years ago when it first came out, but it was like, oh yes, I'll have to do that. But I was only in my late 50s when you were interviewed. So, and now I'm in my late 60s. It's like, and people are dying around me. Like, my sister has died and my parents, of course. But I just didn't even realize before I got your book how much there is involved, because I've prepared my children and grandchildren for, what happens if I have a stroke, what happens if I have a heart attack, what happens, blah, blah, all that stuff, but not all the intricacies, and I've prepared them for the funeral. We've had mock funerals and all that sort of stuff. So they know, what goes on. But all the things in your book, there's just so much more in your book.
And it was really important for me that I did what other people weren't doing, because it can be quite clinical. Like there are funeral directors that have these lists that you can download, and law forms that have a list. Do you want to be buried or cremated? Have you done your will? Where is it kept? But that's about the the bones and mortar, like the bricks and mortar, I should say. But I wanted the heart, because, to me, when you die, where the deed of the house is kept isn't your top priority.
Yes.
You want to farewell your loved one, you're grieving your loved one, and you want to respect them and their heart and their story, not the deed of their mortgage,
Yes.
their house. So that's why I did the bottom drawer book. That's why it's such a personal take. I mean, there is a little bit of, you know, get the will done, your advanced care plan done, but
Yeah.
also, you know, what music do you want at your
Yeah.
funeral? What do you want to be buried in? You know, what do you want to wear? Because
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
those little things at a time of grief that really can set a family imploding. And I had a lady whose mum always wore white sandals,
Oh,
and they couldn't decide which pair of white sandals to bury her in. And this it became a real focus for that family about which of her 8 pairs of white sandals she should be wearing when she's laid to rest. And
yeah.
it's those little things that families fixate on, and then if they can't agree, stuff starts brewing and it all goes to hell.
Yeah.
So that's why it's important just to give, you don't have to plan the whole funeral, you know,
Yeah.
you can leave some personal touches from your family, but just give them a bit of an idea, just so it lightens the load that little bit, so at least they can breathe a little bit easier knowing, oh, okay, mum wanted frangipanis on her, you know, on her,
Yes.
you know, and we
On the
did that.
coffin, or yeah.
We're okay,
Yeah.
everything's okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, because that's what I found with my kids and grandkids, that I shared that sort of stuff with them. I didn't think about what I would wear, even though we went through that with my aunt. She died at home. It was beautiful. And she has 4 children, and couldn't decide on which outfit. And she had a million beautiful, beautiful, expensive outfits, and none of them wanted to put her in any of them because they were so expensive.
Oh, gee, and again, it comes down to what is their worth at that
Yeah,
moment.
that's right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Can
yeah.
be $1 million dress, but if it's
Yeah,
not from the heart, you know.
exactly. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah, yeah. Because I just love the little intricacies. And I should have marked the book with all the things. I haven't done because I read it and I thought, oh my gosh, we all have to have one of these. So I bought 10 and gave them to my friends and family. And I thought I was pretty clever in saying, let's get together and do this, because my husband went, that's a lot of work. I'm just not into that. So we decided to have a dinner party and just fill the book out. And
Fantastic.
just Sunday dinners. It's like, what part are we going to fill out now? So,
And
but
that's exactly right. It doesn't have to be a chore. You can just read
no,
it, put it down, let it, you know, ferment in your brain, and just fill in one page. Or if you know, if a song comes on a radio, you go, oh, I'm going to write that down in my book. Or if you buy a new top and you go, that's the one, you
yeah,
go write the purple top with the beading. It doesn't have to be a chore, but as you know, we all make excuses not to do something.
yeah,
And this can be perceived as fronting. My father is 91. He's never read my book. He just go, oh, that would be too morbid. And it's like, I'm your daughter. Can you support me, please? But B, it just shows what we're up against, particularly with men who
yeah,
just kind of go, no, just put me in a pine box and, you know, let council take me away on bin day,
yeah,
without realizing what that does actually mean for the family when the time comes.
yeah.
It's not that they're not being selfish; they're just not thinking
No,
of the implications. It's not
no.
something that a lot of people do.
Yeah, that's right. And it's a big thing. Like my brother's just yesterday we had the funeral of my brother's father-in-law, but we spent the week, he died last Thursday, and we've spent the whole week choosing which photos, which music. Oh, I wish I'd listened to, like, I remember him sitting in front of me and he told me his favorite music, and I wish I would have written it down. So, that's the sort of things my brother and his wife was saying, and my sister-in-law was saying. And it's like, get this book. This book is the one. But, it's just, you just don't think of these things until it happens. So, and funerals are a big deal in themselves.
They can be, depends on which way to go.
Mm.
Um, And the funeral landscape is absolutely changing. The last 10 years has seen an astronomical shift in the way we commemorate and memorialize our dead, particularly in funerals. I did a wonderful lecture last night from uh, um, a PhD, or just a guru in the UK, and she said in the UK, unattended cremations now make up, a fifth
Yeah.
of all funerals.
Yes.
So it's like there's so many people who just go, right, just deal with this and then deal with that later.
Yeah.
So there is a really changing landscapes and people personalizing funerals as well. So instead of the go to a chapel, there's 3 or 4 songs, 2 of those are hymns, and this is what happens. And then there's the eulogy. That's all going out the window slowly but surely. People are saying, you know what? I don't want to go to the church. Let's take mum to the paddock. She loved sitting in the paddock under that oak tree. Let's have a funeral there. Or she was such a
Mm.
keen bowler. Let's go to the RSL next to the Lawn Bowls Club and
Yeah.
have that farewell. And more people are really personalizing those farewells, but they are coming up against some funeral directors who are very set in their ways. And my message is it's your funeral. The funeral
Mm.
director just organizes a few things, you direct the funeral. And if the funeral director says, oh no, we can't go to that RSL, we don't do that here, then they're not the right funeral director for you. You need to farewell your loved one as they wished. So if that funeral director is not going to help you do it, find another one who will.
Yeah. And I wonder if we could do that ourselves, finding the funeral director before we die.
Yes, absolutely.
That will do that.
Cait, that's a really good point, and it's something I really encourage, whether it's you and your family or if you're part of a Rotary group or a Probus, have a morning at a funeral director, invite the funeral director to your local meeting. And for 20 minutes, they answer all the questions you have. And it virtually becomes an interview between you and that funeral director. You go, yep, I really like that man. Or, oh, no, I didn't like his approach.
Yeah.
And that's great. You strike him off the list. But when I was researching the Bottom Drawer book, and every time I talk to a funeral director since, they're so open and they're so willing to talk about what they do. And it's fabulous. And most of them are absolutely wonderful people and so willing to share. So please take that opportunity and interview your funeral director. Ask them all the questions you want. And it brings me to another point of whether you can see their facilities or not. And this is a big one for me. Many funeral directors say, come on in, Lise. Do you want to see the mortuary? Yeah, come on in. We've just got this new hoist and blah, 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 blah. And they're the ones that I will always give my business to. Should I need a funeral director or should I need to recommend someone, is those ones with an open door policy, because you will find there are some who do not have that open door policy. And I kind of think, oh, what are you hiding? Yeah. There are so many funeral directors opening their doors. Why is your door a little bit closed? So that's another way that you can perhaps get to know your local funeral director and just suss out who you like and who you don't.
Yeah. And we've decided to have a cremation, like just non-attended cremation. Both of us have decided that because we've had such bad experiences with funerals as well. So, people being told they're not allowed to come to somebody's funeral. And it's really, So our idea now, well, my idea anyway, is to have the cremation and then our children just have a party and have open door, like we do at Christmas. It's like, let's come in and, talk about mum, talk about dad, whatever happens. And it's more of a celebration rather than, it is, you're going to you're going to cry about me a lot. I know, and I want you to, but I'd love to hear all the stories, while I'm alive as well. But I want my children to know that they're supported by other people, by the people who drop in.
And that's really important. All this shift towards unattended cremation, and also to a much lesser extent, unattended burial, you can do that too, is the need for some sort of a memorialization. So there's something very cathartic in grief and a shared experience. And that's why getting together at the pub, you could put Auntie May's ashes on the bar and everyone, drinks around the bar and Auntie May's ashes. But
Yeah.
there's still that opportunity for storytelling and sharing and grief and tears and laughs. And
Mm.
there's something in that is quite important. So I urge anyone, if there's an unattended cremation, know and encourage, in a few weeks or a couple of months when, they can come in from overseas,
Yeah.
let's have a barbecue, let's have a get together. It could be the anniversary of their death or their divorce, whatever.
Yeah.
But there's something that's really special about getting together and mourning and grieving together.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, my dad actually, he had lung cancer and was dying for 2 years,
Mm.
but he wanted to have his wake before he died.
Oh,
So
yes.
we set him up. We set him up in the chair. Everybody came, but he said he had to have his scotch and just sit in the corner, have his scotch, and people come over as if he was in the coffin. And he heard some beautiful stories
Oh,
about
Kate,
himself.
that's wonderful. But how progressive of that.
Yeah,
And all your friends, I'm
yeah,
interested in his friends and families. What did they say? Did they go, this is a bit weird, this is a
yeah.
bit strange?
No, I think they knew Dad. Dad was known
Yeah,
like as a philosopher, as a
right.
storyteller, and it wasn't just strange for Dad. It was just like, oh, Norman's having a wake. Okay. Did he die? Like, no, not yet. But he
Yeah.
wants to hear all the amazing things while he's alive, not in a coffin because, we're from a Catholic family, Catholic more than Catholic, I always say.
Mhm.
But he was going to have the full um, church
The mass and
funeral
yeah.
and mass and everything. And yeah, but he didn't want to miss out on all the stories that he should have heard while he was alive.
Because
So,
those Catholic masses are quite different they're not as
no,
personable
no.
as I find to
Mm,
other things. And that's why it's important and people write it down, whether they write it down in the bottom drawer book or whether they just tell someone or stick a post-it note to their will of where they want their farewell. Do they want the clergy involved or the church
yeah,
involved?
yeah,
So there's lots of things to think about and ask those questions if you are pondering or you have someone in your life with a life limiting illness. There's
yeah,
those little things that you can because sometimes they're Catholic, they go to mass every Sunday, but when you
yes,
ask them, they go, no, I've spent enough time in that
that's
church,
right.
I want to go to the beach, thanks. It's like,
Yeah,
oh, I
exactly.
didn't know. And you wouldn't have known had you not
No,
asked that question.
no, that's right. Exactly. And like my passion is people sharing their stories and sharing their
Mm,
stories to everyone. Like, so they go down the generations as well.
yeah.
So we know great Auntie Mary and Uncle Bob and Uncle Bunny. I used to have a great Uncle Bunny. And, it's like those stories are to be shared.
Mm.
And I'm at the time of my life where I want to share my stories. And, I'm sure my children and grandchildren are just rolling their eyes at all the stories. But I just really think they're so important. And then
Mm.
to have, your book actually, um, and I want to say it is done with such humor as well. Your
Mm.
dad really like it's so entertaining and so gentle
Yeah.
and humorous that I think, having this book to go back to, after I've died as
Yeah.
well, in the years to come. It's like, oh, mum said this because I don't answer things in normal ways. I'm a bit,
Mm.
outside the box thinking person. So, yeah, it's just getting back into that person's character as well.
And it was really important to me. And I get asked this a lot. Oh, why don't you do an app? Why don't you do it online?
Mm,
And very, very simply, I say no, because I don't want these memories locked behind a password somewhere on a computer or a phone that no one can access. But
yeah.
in particular, handwriting,
Yes.
knowing that your loved one held this book, maybe cried over it, laughed at it,
Yeah.
spilt their coffee on it, and doodled on it is so important to have
Yeah.
that writing. I've actually a young lass called Kelly. Her mother died of cancer way too young at 60. And Kelly's had some of her mum's words that she wrote in the book tattooed on her.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's just such an important, tangible thing. And I often get told whenever I get sad, I pull out the book,
Yes.
because there's so much of their person in here. Like I ask, what things about yourself and your life are you most proud of? How would you describe yourself? So it's not only the nitty gritty of, do you want to, what kind of coffin do you want, or where would you like to be buried, or your ashes scattered? I actually delve into a little bit about the person. And the amount of people who send me an emails going, thank God for your book. We just stole what she said and we used it for the eulogy.
I love that.
Which is great, which is exactly what I wanted, because I want them to celebrate you and your honest story. And that's one of the main reasons I wrote the book. And you mentioned the color, and the gentle writing was so important. I don't want it to be clinical. It's too important for that. I want it from the heart. And I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I worked really hard on finding that heart. There's a fair bit of Scotch in that book, Scotch whiskey in that book. I have to, so yeah. There were some days there were some nights I would be laughing hysterically at my own joke.
Yes.
And then you wake up and you see your work and you go, oh, it wasn't that funny, but yeah, it'll make the cut.
That's right. Yes. Yeah, that's right. And I love, you're saying about handwriting. That's your handwriting in the beginning of the book.
Yes, that's a new edition. That's a new addition to the 4th edition.
Oh, right.
Yeah. Exactly. And it's just evolved. Like the first one wasn't pretty much 90%, but it just didn't have those really personable touches. And I was paying a lot of money for other people's quotes.
Yes.
I used to use a Megan Washington quote from one of her songs, and just kind of things I'm thinking, no, why should I pay someone else's for copyright for their work when I can do my own and say exactly what I want to say? So I struggled with my writing, and it's like, no, that's me.
That's
messy and all. So
it's not messy.
And I just want to encourage people to write. Get their pen out and write and doodle and spill stuff and smudge muffin on it.
That's
right. What it's all about.
Who did the illustrations?
A fantastic illustrator in Brisbane called Phil Judd. It was so wonderful. I found him on the internet. His portfolio was online, and then I gave him a call, and I just knew he was the one straight away, because he'd been a palliative care nurse. So he had he was a nurse come bloody illustrator. And I went, oh. So he was able to use that knowledge. And at the time he was nursing his aunt. So he had a real lived experience of what this book was all about. So I really love the little nuances he was able to add to those illustrations. Like every night, because I was working full time as a journo, and then at night I would work on the book. So at 2 o'clock in the morning, I'd send an email to him saying, hey, this illustration, I want a coffin, and I want a mirror ball, and I want a fridge. And I just can imagine him logging on at 8:30 in the morning. What's Lisa want now?
Yes.
But he just did such a wonderful job. Captured everything I needed.
Yeah, that's right. Yes. And you still sort of, you're a cemetery wanderer.
It comes down to stories. The stories of the dead can tell us so much about life. And those stories are being lost. Particularly heritage pioneer cemeteries. I'm about to start doing tours of the Toowoomba, the Drayton and Toowoomba General Cemetery. So I've been deep diving into these graves, and I want to stay away from the local member who was in Parliament or the first mayor. Those stories are already documented. So I'm just finding random graves and exploring them. And I've found some absolute crackers. Week I found a man called Henry Day Dark, and I saw his obelisk, like a big thing on the top of his grave, and I went, oh, that's an interesting symbolism. Let's research this guy. And I found out, born in Melbourne to British parents, went overseas, lived in Britain, and then the Zulu War in Southern Africa happened. So he joined the military, and he was on the battlefield beside the Prince Imperial when he was killed. Now, the Prince Imperial was the end of the Bonaparte reign, the end of Napoleon Bonaparte dynasty. And this guy in the Toowoomba Cemetery was on the battlefield when the prince was speared 17 times and returned to Toowoomba and was a watchmaker, and unfortunately succumbed to tuberculosis, which he would have caught over there in Southern Africa. But that story, no one will have ever known that story until they explored that one particular grave of, literally, I think there's about 35,000 people in that cemetery. And it was purely that something about that grave. And that's why I often talk about cemeteries being libraries. I often call them libraries, because every grave is a chapter of our history. And that's an important chapter that nobody knows about. I've never seen it written about. Also in the Toowoomba Cemetery is a guy with a Purple Heart. Extraordinary. He flew in the Korean War alongside Americans, and his plane was shot at, and the canopy of his fighter jet was shattered. So not only was he flying a plane with no protection, he also had the perspex in his face, and he made it back to the airfield. And the Americans went, holy dooly, you are something else. And he went to hospital and checked himself out the next day and flew 2 more missions.
Of course he did.
And absolutely incredible. And he's there in Toowoomba Cemetery.
Wow.
And it's so important, these stories. Ordinary people doing extraordinary things. And that's what I want to talk about. And that's the role of cemeteries. They're just wonderful story keepers.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I have a really good friend of mine. We meet for coffee once a month on Monday, and we tell each other stories about our life. And I just sit there and go, wow, you are just amazing. We have to write a book on this. So we're just writing down all our stories to give to one another.
I wish I'd started writing some of the stuff I did in my 20s. I just thought was standard, but now I know, no, that was a little unique. And that's a really big thing. People think, oh, look, I'm not important. I've done nothing exciting, whatever else. Yeah, you have. You've lived at a time, and there were people who want to hear about this. And this is the interesting thing with more people choosing cremation over burial. I would never have found Henry Day-Darg had he been cremated and scattered. So
very true.
How do we commemorate and document our loved ones in a world of, or in a time of cremation? So there are lots more online opportunities now for memorialization. But
but still, I've never thought of that. Gosh. But then the online stuff, that changes, and then who owns that as well? Who owns the IP for that?
And it also gets lost among billions of other people. And then there are so many other aspects of what else you can look at online. So you get kind of muddled. It's an interesting one. And that's why, again, it comes down to writing your own stories. Don't leave them on the computer, print them out so they're in paper.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we'll have to kill a few trees to do that, but
put it in the bottom drawer. That's what the bottom drawer there is for.
Why did you call it the bottom drawer book?
For obvious reasons. So people knew. So it's like, what was the name of the book that Mum had? She told me she wrote all this stuff in. Where do I find it? It's called the bottom drawer book. Let's go look in the bottom drawer. It was as simple as that. It was really important. And it was interesting working with graphic designers and that kind of thing. And they're going, and we can do a picture of a sunset. And I just went, cliche after cliche. No cliches in my
that's right.
And we have to get away from those cliches of when people die, they walk into the sunset. They don't. No, they don't.
Well, do they? We don't know, do they?
They go in the ground, or they're cremated. That's where they go, to be perfectly frank. But no, it's interesting, and it raises a point about how we perceive death, and do we even say dead?
I
We say
know.
die, and we don't.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm helping a friend at the moment, and her brother has passed, and that's
Oh,
her terminology. And
yeah.
it's like,
Hmm.
whatever gets you through the day.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that it, when it's so raw, or even after it's raw, it could be years down the track. You don't say, "My brother died. He
Yes.
passed. He
Yeah,
passed
yeah.
away." So yeah, our whole vernacular is stay away from death, dead, and dying. We just
Yeah,
don't say it.
that's right. Yeah,
Mm,
yeah, yeah. I'm on a mission though that people say dead, dying, death as
mm.
well, because it does. My brother had the worst experience with his brother-in-law because he rang his father-in-law died while my brother and his family was there. So he rang his brother-in-law and said, "Oh, hi, your dad's gone." And he went, "Where did he go to? Like what's happening?" Because he was in a nursing home. And it's just so confusing to everything rather than saying, "I'm sorry, your dad has died." I like it's more a softer thing to say he's gone or he's passed or, you know.
It's more definitive. It's like there's no ambiguity. And this is why we have to be really careful, in particular with our language around children. Because if
Yes,
you say, "Oh, mummy's sleeping," it's like,
yes,
okay, when's she going to wake up? And then there's this thing, which will continue for years. Um, Dad says, "I'm going to bed. I'm just going to have a sleep."
yeah,
"Oh, are you going to wake up? Like,
yes,
will I see you again?" So we have to be really clear the way we communicate death
yes,
with children, because
yeah.
they will associate the terminology you use for many years to come.
Yeah, that's right, exactly. I've
Mm.
had kids who won't go to sleep because they're
Mm.
afraid of not waking up.
Yeah.
So yeah, I really think it's important that we use the proper words because
Mm.
it is, that's what it is. And I've had a bad experience about a dog dying. One of my friend's dogs died, and she put up on Facebook, oh, whatever the dog's, oh, I can't remember her dog's name, but has gone over the rainbow and over the Rainbow Bridge. And I thought, oh, that's near my place. I'll just race up and see if it's up there. And then I raced up to the bridge that is called the Rainbow Bridge. And I went to go on Facebook and say, oh, she's not here. And then I was looking, RIP, I'm sorry to hear that. And I thought, oh, okay. Sorry.
I love that there's a bridge called the Rainbow Bridge. I love that there's
Yes,
actually a thing. But yeah, it's whatever gets people through
yeah,
initially. But
yeah,
how did we get to this point that our
yeah,
society now won't acknowledge death, dying, dead?
yes, yeah, that's
There's
right.
been decades of that brewing that we don't
Yeah,
approach it. And it comes down to, we've been outsourcing death for so long now. We
yeah,
hand over our dead to perfect strangers in the middle of the night.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
is it time to reclaim that? And there is an undercurrent brewing in Australia that is reclaiming that. So
yeah,
bodies are staying in the home longer. People, you don't need to call your funeral director at 1 a.m. when
mm,
somebody dies. Call
mm,
them the next day, sit
yeah,
with your loved one, have a cup of tea, because that's going to be the last time you get to spend time with your loved one.
yeah, yeah,
So make it last as long as you can. There is no rule that says you have to call someone immediately. Just breathe, take it in, and be with that person.
yeah,
Unless, of course, there's dodgy circumstances, then you call the
yes,
police. But,
yeah, that's
if it
right.
was an expected death, take that
Yeah,
time to be with that person. You don't need to call anyone straight away.
yeah. And even knowing who to call as well,
Hmm.
you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, every elderly person in your family, you must have their doctor's phone number stuck to your fridge.
Yeah,
That's a no-brainer. That's what
yeah,
you need.
yeah,
And you also need your loved one to regularly go to the doctor. Like every 3 months, go to the doctor.
yeah,
Um, because you want to keep them away from the coroner if you can.
yes, that's
And if they're known to the doctor, and the doctor can go, yes, last time I saw Betty, all her figures were up, and
yeah,
it was just a matter of time.
mm,
Easily, a life extinct form comes very quickly from that
yes,
doctor with a cause of death.
yeah,
um, and no need for a coroner to be involved.
yeah, that's right.
So yes, so there are little things we can do. You can just so mum, what doctor you go to at the moment? Oh, right, I'm just going to write his phone number here. Right,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, yeah.
Those little things are really important.
Yeah, yes, they are. Yeah. Yeah, because I didn't even know you didn't have to call a funeral director at all. I thought that was the first thing that you did, and you started the ball rolling on when's the funeral, all that sort of stuff.
Yes, a
So,
funeral director can certainly guide you, because
yeah.
a funeral director cannot, in most cases, unless you're in a remote community, for example, 99% of the cases, a funeral director cannot move a body without a cause of death. So the person will have to be life extinct and a cause of death before they can move.
Wow.
Otherwise, because that will dictate where they're moved to.
Yeah.
So if a coroner needs to be involved, it's like, we have no idea, he was fine when he went to bed and he just didn't wake up.
Mm,
That's when the coroner will be involved.
mm,
And that's when it's like, okay, we can't work out a cause of death. So he will be moved to the coroner.
yeah.
Or if there was oh no, we expected him to die, blah, blah, blah,
Mm,
the first phone call you would be to a medical professional and say, hey, listen, this has happened. They'll come or send a delegate to sign him off. Sometimes they can do it over the phone, and then the body can be dealt with either by a funeral director, or you may decide to keep them in the home, as you are well allowed to, for a few days. You can call a doula, for example. There are some funeral directors who will help you call them in their home. They have facilities. They have cooling plates, for example. They have some special ice that they can use. They've got all sorts of tips of how you can keep them at home for a couple of days.
yeah.
And then, yeah, a funeral home itself does not have to be involved.
Yeah, that is so awesome. It's really good to know
Mm.
because we're all different anyway,
Mm.
and I've always I've always thought like my funeral will be this amazing party, with balloons and people riding all over the coffin and
Mhm.
confetti and things like that. And then I realized I didn't have to have all that either. And
Mm.
it costs so much. That's the trouble, I think. Cost drives me. Well,
Yeah,
it doesn't drive me, but I
yeah.
mean, cost is massive. But yeah, it's just that you don't have to do it in that way that it's been done forever.
Well, this is the thing, it hasn't been done forever. This is
Uh-huh.
this is an absolutely, the way we do funerals is an imported way. When the English came, they brought their funerary practices to Australia.
Right.
So we have adopted someone else's traditions. They're not
Yeah.
our traditions. So
Yeah.
our traditions could be a barbecue and beach cricket with
Yeah.
Auntie May's ashes, or
Yeah.
even her coffin on the beach before the
Yeah.
coffin goes to the crematorium or the cemetery.
Hmm.
We can do that. That is a funeral, just
Mm.
because it's not a traditional funeral.
Yeah.
That was never our tradition anyway.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and the tide is slowly changing. We are learning that we can personalize our funerals. And I
Mm.
can see some people going, what? The coffin on the beach? Yes,
Yeah.
you can do that. You
Yeah.
absolutely can. You can take the coffin to the park and have your barbecue. And, it's not for everyone. Absolutely not. But then, you
Hmm.
know what? A chapel with a coffin out the front at the altar isn't
Yeah.
a lot for, isn't ideal for a lot of people either. And we've
No.
all been in those chapels and sitting there going, oh my God, he would have hated this. He
Yes.
would have
Yeah.
absolutely hated this. We've all done it. So let's not do it again. Let's
Yeah.
find other ways.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. And, even you saying like the Australian thing, it's sort of that it was imported. It's like, oh, it's hard to explain. It's like we're Australian now, but we're white Australians now. So we're talking about the white Australian
Mm,
experience, not the Aboriginal, not our First Nations experience either.
no. Or
So
our islanders. And this is the thing.
yes,
We're so multicultural.
yeah,
And you probably don't know it, in your own street. There could be people laying who've died.
mhm,
They could be lying in their front room, in their bedroom right now, surrounded by their family, because that's their culture. An islander culture, for example, in Islam, for example, it's so hands on.
mm,
It's it's this British thing that we just go,
Yeah.
oh no, bring out
Yeah,
your
we
dead,
have that.
take out our dead away. But there are so
Yeah.
many other communities within Australia who are doing their traditional way, and their traditional way is caring for their dead on their own terms in their own home.
Yes. Yeah.
And you'll be surprised how close it is to your home that this is
Well,
happening.
next door. We have, Indian people next door who have 4 generations of people, and great grandma died. And the celebrations that went on there were amazing. So
And the British way of doing it is, we mourn for an hour. We mingle before the chapel, at the chapel, and then after the chapel, and a bit of a wake. So an hour or two, and we're done. Other traditions in this multicultural society can go for a week and longer. It's like dancing and singing and mourning and not sleeping. It's all part of lots of different traditions within Australia. And some funeral directors are more tailored to those multicultural funerals, whereas I've had funeral directors who have absolutely no idea of how to accommodate those deaths, which is absolutely fine. That's not their jam. But there are funeral directors who specifically, as specialists in Hindu cremations, for example.
Yeah. I'm going to be really researching funeral directors now, because I really,
And they don't know everything. And this is what I found out. I was trying to talk to some funeral directors and giving them information about what I found out. And they're going, no, that's not right. That can't be right. It's like, well, yeah, it is. I was at the funeral. This is what happened. Oh, no. So there's we've just got to be careful that we don't give too much power to the funeral director. That's what I'm trying to say. They say no, or they don't know, go, okay, no worries at all. I'll find someone who does know, or who can accommodate me. And it was interesting. I was having a discussion only last night about at what point did men in suits become the gatekeepers of our dead? And it's starting to change now, with more bespoke funeral directors coming in, and a lot of those are female, which makes sense, as the carers and the nurturers and the organisers. But it was a really interesting statement. Beck Lyons, actually, from often-taboo in Tasmania, said that at what point did death become the domain of men in suits? And I thought that was, wow, that's absolutely right. That's how it is.
Yeah, that's right. As so much is.
And that's probably only been 100, 150 years, I guess, where funerals have started. Because up until then, the dead were kept at home, and everything was done for them by their loved ones.
That's right. Oh, wow. Well, Lisa, I think we probably need to wrap this up.
We could chat all day.
I know we could. I know it could just go on and on, because it's just such an interesting subject, and so much like I did the gentle art of Swedish death cleaning. And it's like, this is part of it as well, it's preparing. And I don't think you have to be of a certain age to do this either.
Absolutely not. When I wrote the book, I actually wrote it for, the initial idea was to write it for young men, because they're disproportionately the ones who get killed or die. But of course, they're 50-foot and bulletproof. So they didn't want to borrow the book, but it was the women, like the 50+ women, who are the organisers, who don't want to burden their family, who just want to get shit done, that really love this book and get a lot out of this book. And the wonderful emails I get from people going, oh, well, we didn't know Mum had this, and then we found it. And it changed everything for us. And that's what it's all about. But death can come at any age. And look, whether you fill in the bottom drawer book or not, or you just go to the pub and have a drink and just say, you know what, just let my partner know that if I die, I want to be buried in a cardboard box under a gum tree. Okay. And this is another thing. When your friend says that to you, go, okay, even though it may make you feel uncomfortable and irky, and don't talk like that, that's more, but don't do that. Just shut up and listen. Because they're opening a window. It's like, okay, so you want to be buried under the gum tree. What else would you like? and then you
Yeah.
make that note, or you know, send an email to the partner or whatever else. Those
Yeah.
conversations are so important, those little window openings. So
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. And that's the thing. We need to talk more about death as well, I think, at
So
every
thank you so much for your time. It's been
yeah,
wonderful chatting,
yeah.
Cait.
And thank you so much for writing this book. It's absolutely amazing. It's entertaining. It's everything that I've previously said. It's just so lovely
Who
that
thought preparing for the inevitable could be fun? You know,
I know exactly.
I get told that all the time,
Yeah,
which is
yeah,
exactly what I wanted from the bottom drawer book. Yeah.
yeah. It's amazing. Thanks so much, Lisa, for talking to me. It's
It was
been
nice to see you, Cait. Thank you.
okay. Bye.